Okay, so I had gone over cleaning up my carb in one of my previous videos, but I still had some questions about this from one of my subscribers. So I'm just going to make a video. I put a description of what I do in the last video, but this time I'm actually going to do up a video to kind of illustrate exactly what I was talking about. So this is my spare carburetor, but it's the VM28, my carb VM28. And after you install it on the bike, and you've got the cable, the throttle cable down through here, and it's hooked into the slide so that the slide can go up and down. Even once it's hooked up to the twist grip, you can see that there's going to be a bit of length here, right? Like it goes down a bit. It'll be sitting in this part here on top the adjustment screw here. So what you want to do is you want to screw this all the way down so that, let me just get like this, there we go. So that when it's in here, you'll have a bit of slack. Like it won't be tight. It won't be tight in there against the slide. There'll be a little bit of slack, but that's fine. Start like that, because you'll be adjusting the air screw and the throttle screw to get it to run properly and idle properly. And then once you've got it there, the last thing you do is come back and start to screw this out. See, I've got the lock nut all the way up. Screw this out so that as it's attached to the slide, it starts to push up on the casing here, on the cable housing, pushes it up and puts tension on this, because the other end is connected to the twist grip, right? So that's where it's going to show up, is it's going to start to lift this. When you've got your bike idling, you'll have it idling. It'll be running a nice and warm engine. You'll hear it running fine. As you start to back this up, it'll start to pick up the slide. It'll just pick it up a little bit. It won't pick it up much, but it'll pick it up a little bit, and you'll hear the engine speed go up. And then you know you're right. You've taken up all the slack in this end of the cable where it fastens into the top of the slide, and it's nice and tight now. So now as soon as you touch the throttle on the handlebar, it'll start to pick that slide up. It'll be really, really fast, but it'll also mean that you've got no slack in there. There's no delay. So that's the last adjustment you do. But then once it's wherever it is, wherever that point is where the engine sped up, back down the lock nut and just lock it in place. And you can see that spins really easily. It spins really easily. And then you just give it a little bit of a tightening there. You don't need to torque this down very hard. I can't remember what that is. I think that's an 8mm, but have a look. All right, so that takes care of that. That's your last adjustment after you've got the other two set up. So my experience with this and the way these, we'll talk about the air screw first. So these come from the carburetor. These come from the factory about a little more than one turn out. So once you've cleaned your carburetor and blown all the passages out and made sure everything works good, put this back in. Remember, there's a spring on this screw inside. So you just take it and you turn it clockwise, and there you go. So it's all the way in, and you see I didn't put much torque on that. You just gently go. You'll bottom out, and once you bottom out, you just back it off half a turn, one turn. So somewhere between 1 and 1 1/4 turn is a good starting point for setting up the air jet for idle on this thing. And then you can start to adjust it. Once the engine's warm, you may have to stand there with your hand on the throttle to get the engine up to temperature and to get it to a steady idle. Once it's up to a decent idle, what you do is you start to just slowly open this just a little bit, give the engine a little time to respond, maybe even blip the throttle a little bit. And then you open this up, and what you'll see is the engine will start to speed up a little bit. And it'll speed up, and then it kind of starts to slow down. You stop there, and you go back clockwise. You screw back in a little bit to find your optimum idle speed. Okay, so again, you open it up, you go counterclockwise. The engine speed will rise and then it'll kind of peak and then start to fall off again. Then you clockwise, turn this clockwise, screw it back down in, and set it up for the idle speed that you want. On my bike, it's around 1.5. So you don't need to turn this very much. At least I didn't. I haven't used this carburetor on the bike, but on the other one, the one that came with the bike, it's at about 1.5, and that's the idle speed that I like. And of course, as the bike warms up, it tends to pick up idle speed a little bit anyway. So I kind of leave it open a little bit more than I need to for when the bike is cold. Okay. And then there's this throttle screw. So if you recall, this screw goes into the body, and on the slide, there's a ramp, and the ramp is on this side of the slide, and it's at an angle, cut into the slide like this. It's cut into the slide like, and as you screw this in, this needle pushes against that ramp, and it pushes it up. So it'll slowly open it up a little bit. So what you're doing is you're using this to adjust your idle speed. This is your main adjust. And as you push this in, it starts to lift up it's very hard to tell, but it's lifting up the slide. And you don't need to lift this up very much. It's attached to the main needle, right? And it's pulling gas up through the largest orifice, your main jet. So this only has to come up a little bit, and it'll start to increase the idle speed. So that's one that you can set that when it's cold, but usually what I'll do is when the engine is nice and warm, I'll come back and I'll readjust this, and usually end up cutting it back a bit. Don't cut it back too far, because then it'll not want to idle when it's cold. But cut it back so that the engine's not racing. The engine shouldn't really be running much more than 1,000 RPM. You shouldn't hear it idling too fast. And you also, conversely, you don't want to go too slow either. Chunk, chunk, chunk. You don't want that. Have it running where it's at a decent speed. The oil pump's working properly, like everything's working well. So the setting for this, because what I did was I had this where and as a matter of fact, I'll do it right now. I'll show you how I did this, how I know, or at least how I think I know what this number is. Okay, so I'll get this. There's the keeper. So there's the slide, or sorry, there's the ramp on the side of the slide that goes into. And what I did was, let me get in here. You can see in there the end of that needle. And what I did was, I took this needle all the way out, just like that. I put it in just where it bottomed, and there I just turned it a little bit. Now I can feel it's caught the threads, and I started counting the turns while I was watching it in here. And what I found was, watching it in here, came out to be a little more than 6 turns where I found it came into the body of the carburetor. So between 6 and 7 turns, it's going to come into the body of the carburetor and start to contact this ramp and start to lift this up a little bit so that it pulls the needle out of the main jet and increases your idle. So that's how I knew. So somewhere between 6 and 7 turns, just to set this up rough, and that was fine for getting the idle to go closer to 7 turns. That was fine for getting the idle to go smoothly. Okay, so I'm going to come off the tripod with the camera, and I'm going to go over and just quickly go over the procedure that I use to start my bike. I'm not going to bother starting the bike. I'm here in the garage. I got the door closed, but I'm just going to go through the steps and show you what I do to start my bike. All right, so we'll just put that there for now. Okay, so here's what I do when I go to start my bike. First thing I do, once I've turned on the tap, of course, the fuel tap, is I come down and I depress the enricher lever. Push that down. And then I come up and I pull in on the decompressor, and I give it a few spins like this. Now, even though the cylinder is decompressed, it'll still draw in some fuel through the enricher circuit and throw a little bit of fuel up into the cylinder head. And on my bike, the way I got it set up, I mean, sometimes I can start it on a kick with the enricher lever depressed, but usually what I do is I click it up. Now, try it both ways on your bike, but for my bike, I click this back up, and then of course just go through the regular procedure, turn on the run switch, and then there you go. Turn the bike slowly until I see the ammeter deflect, and then what I'll do is I will just give it just a little bit of pressure on the throttle as I kick the bike over, and that's usually enough to catch the bike's engine and get her started, and then I can adjust the throttle. And then I'll stand here for maybe 30 seconds or a minute just holding onto the throttle, because remember, I've already adjusted it so there's not a lot of slack. Like, I don't turn it very far. I just kind of just take it up a little bit, just a few millimeters, and that's all it takes to just kind of get the throttle. And once the bike's warm, after about a minute, she'll want to idle by itself. So that's the procedure that I follow to get my bike going.